I'd like to have a brief discussion on the police DWI program issue. We can talk a little bit about counselor pay. I'd like to have a discussion on public works and parking, the parking garages specifically, and then a general discussion regarding training. That was something that I think Counselor Harris brought up throughout the budget hearings, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what the plan is for training throughout the year, and then if there is anything else that the committee would like to discuss, and then hopefully we can have a motion to approve the fiscal year budget. Ms. McCoy, you passed out today and over the weekend detailed memos dated May 4th, and then another one May 5th and May 1st with all of the background information from the last 2 or 3 weeks, the additional information we requested. It's very thorough. Thank you for that. The other thing I noticed is a lot of the things we were going to discuss, we have actually scheduled to have detailed discussions at either Finance Committee or the Public Works Committee, and so we can, and that information is in the memo dated May 4th. So thank you for that, Ms. McCoy. So with that, is there a memo to approve the agenda? I mean, a motion to approve the agenda. Certainly. It is 8 a.m. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, Ms. McCoy, if we can talk about all funds, non-departmental.
Mr. Chair, councilors, mayor. So non-departmental is exactly that. It's non-departmental. Typically, it's things that aren't attributable to any one particular department. In this case, we're doing the first several pages are all transfers out. Non-departmental is the primary department that we receive. First, let me back up. You have this packet with a FTE count and then a line item by line item. And so the biggest thing non-departmental does is it receives almost all of the city's revenue, non-enterprise fund revenues, property tax, sales tax, lodgers tax, fees. It's just the general source of where we receive our revenue. It's not attributable to any department, division, or other business unit. It's just non-departmental. And from that, so in the lodgers tax, you'll see, and I'm on page 1 of the transfers, these are transfers of the lodgers tax out to various other funds, like marketing lodgers tax 50%, general fund, convention center debt. The $3 million, just for instance, that goes up by $337,717. That's a convention center debt service increase. Then you can see down in here in the municipal GRT, there's like Ride Finders is the $22,882. So it's just really transferring these special revenues out to other departments. That's one of the largest aspects of non-departmental. The other big part of non-departmental is debt service. And this is all the debt service that is for our GRT, both senior lien and subordinate lien GRT debt. It's transferred, it's received into the non-departmental area and then transferred out to the various debt service funds. The other two large operations that are in non-departmental are SWAMA and BDD. SWAMA did include their budget in this. It's approximately 9.1, 9.2 million. And then BDD did not submit a budget. These are both, we're a fiscal agent for BDD, and I'm not exact, and I think we're also fiscal agent for SWAMA. So that's why they submit their budgets to us, but it's, they have their own boards, and their budgets are approved by their boards. So, other than that, there are a few salary line items in non-departmental, and there's actually quite a few employees. If you look at the FTE count, there's a total of 73 employees in non-departmental. And typically, those are folks in public works that are in the engineering and really driven just for capital. These are our engineers, designers, program managers, and that. And so, again, their revenue sources, they're really driven by capital and funded out of the 0.5% GRT, Fund 3102. And so, again, that's where there is a one position in finance that's funded in here. There's a couple people from IT, and those are the primary people who are funded out of non-departmental. And it's just a few people in a few departments except for public works. The bulk of the FTEs are in public works.
Okay, and that would be because the funding source is specific and for specific purposes.
It's for very specific capital projects funded from 3102 and design and those functions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from Councilors Villarreal or Villar-Coppler on this issue? Mayor, did you have anything? Okay.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, Councilor Harris.
So, I mean, it represents a 28% decrease, and really I listened to your explanation. It's really transfers out, coming from, wherever it may go. But why such a large decrease?
One, BDD's budget is last year's budget was 9.8 million.
Oh, it's not in there.
And it's not in there. And there's also last year had the $20 million of senior lien GRT bond.
Okay.
It was received into the non-departmental and then transferred out to the projects.
All right.
So that's, 30 million.
Yeah, so that makes sense. All right, thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right, Ms. McCoy, if we can now discuss the property tax again.
Mr. Chairman.
I would like to point out one other thing. There's a line item in here that has a $1,800,000 increase, and that is the funding for Midtown campus operations. So Midtown campus operations and debt service is funded out of non-departmental. I just want to make that clear.
Mr. Chair, one other clarification.
Yes.
So Brad, the decrease, let me just parrot this back to you. The decrease in this non-departmental is because BDD was included last year in the figures, and it is not. And then you said 30 million, so I wasn't sure what you were referring to, because the senior liens were 20, right? Or is that with the debt service?
Well, the 20 million is the
funds.
the GRT bond being transferred out.
Yeah.
And the fact that BDD is not in it. They're about $9.8 million budget.
Okay.
Together, they're roughly 30 million.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, moving on to property tax. The May 1st packet that you have in front of you that was distributed last week, item number 6 contains a memo from our treasurer. It's a 2-page memo reviewing property tax forecasts and property tax trends. There is two things that I want to point out before Christina gives us an overview that you have in front of you. This is the first year that the city has performed revenue forecasting. Both Christina, Ms. Keys, and myself have experience and revenue forecasting for other organizations. And this, similar to the deep dives that we have performed with each department, we are also performing a deep dive into revenue. I think many of you have brought to our attention that some revenue sources are under-collected, that we are leaving revenue on the table. So that is part of what we will also be reviewing in FY20 is the sources that are where we are not collecting as much revenue as we need to in the city. In addition to focus on our revenue, we are doing quarterly revenue projections. This is a point in time, just as the revenue estimates for last year's budget were a point in time estimate, and we can plan to continue to bring you quarterly updates at the Finance Committee with revisions, if necessary, either up or down as we see how the economy also rolls out over the next year. So with that, Christina is prepared to walk you through the 2-page memo and highlight some of the points and her great job at forecasting.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. What I'll do is just walk you through the memo that was provided last week. It was a 2-page memo specifically addressing property tax and the revenue projection associated with it. This particular revenue stream, this is the first time that we've attempted to do a projection associated with it, as Mary pointed out. This is something that the Finance Department anticipates taking on every quarter, is updating the revenue forecast so that when we come to the budget hearings next year, we'll have a more accurate and timely projection to work with and to help us zero in on the revenues that we're receiving and what we may anticipate in the coming fiscal year for next year. As Mary pointed out, revenue projections are a point in time. They are a forecast, and they're also an estimate. They're not written in stone. They're not hard and fast numbers. It's based on historical data that we observe, and then we anticipate, or in some instances do not anticipate, a growth rate associated, and make a projection or an estimate based upon that moving forward. In particular, property tax is comprised of revenue associated from new construction, the maintenance of property, and the market value for commercial and residential properties within the city. Typically, property tax revenue is generated about 20% commercial and 80% residential. And the changes in property valuation may occur when ownership transitions to a new owner, improvements to the property occur, such as building an addition or outbuildings in your property, damage due to disaster or calamity, or the reassessment of the property to market value. Property valuations may be impacted by various economic indicators, as we've seen with all of the revenue streams that we perform forecasts for. Property tax is generated primarily from the assessed property value and the sales of homes and property within the city. And the payments are typically cyclical due to remittance deadlines that are set by the county. This is twice a year. Over the course of FY15 through FY18, historically, we observed that property tax receipts increased nearly 20%. And this is an exceedingly strong pace. We actually outpaced a lot of the other metro areas across the country, and we were the beneficial recipients of these revenue increases. Property tax is estimated to, the revenue itself is estimated to continue on its upward trend. And for FY18 in particular, revenue received was $11.4 million, which made up approximately 9.5% of the total general fund revenue. Property tax revenue was budgeted during the previous budget process at $10.1 million for FY19, which did not account for increased revenue activity. So it was actually under budgeted in FY19. And although the city only budgeted $10.1 million, the current FY19 projection anticipates growth of approximately $600,000, bringing the level up to $12 million. The FY20 forecast going forward of 13.1 million continues the projected growth trend observed over the last 4 fiscal years, and then doubling that growth observed to the current fiscal year. This strength is supported not only due to various economic indicators and unique traits that we see in Santa Fe, such as retirees moving to Santa Fe and the boomerang generation who grew up here, were educated, gained work experience in another municipality, and decided to come on back to Santa Fe. That is contributing to it, in addition to new growth, which is termed construction on land that's already been valued. So it increases the value overall. And within Santa Fe, there are various new construction projects that are anticipated to come onto the tax rolls in FY20, which also leads to the anticipated growth and projected increase. The record level home sales that we've also observed over the last 2 fiscal years have garnered a spike in property tax distribution to the county and to the city. And let's see. The general consensus in various discussions with realtors around town, with the county assessors, with various people within land use and finance, continues to support this trend of a strong upward swing in property tax revenue activity. And if most economic indicators continue to hold steady, and this momentous wave of second homeowners continue into Santa Fe, then we anticipate the revenue to stay on the increase. And again, this is the first year that we've attempted to do a forecast or a revenue estimate for revenue inflows to the city. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Okay, questions from the committee? Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Keats. So, this is something I've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, and I saw your response, and I had kind of thought we'd see a bit more hard data from the assessor's office, but what I realized as I went through it again is that it's really the budget for this year is so understated, and given the $12 million, that it really we're not looking at in actuality a 30. I mean, depending, it's I think it's 30% increase in all funds and a 37% increase in the general fund in property taxes. So I responded to Ms. McCoy. You probably saw it over the weekend, where I realized that. So this is probably only represents. I didn't do the math, but it's essentially 12 million, if that in fact is what it proves to be, which I believe, to a recommended budget of 13,173. That's really about a 10% increase, right at a 10% increase, and I think that's defensible. I think that I did go on to say I question whether all the apartment projects are going to come online this year, but that's something I've been talking about when an issue of housing is like, why isn't the marketplace getting the things built when they went through all the trouble of getting it entitled? So at any rate, I just wanted to say that I accept the projection based on the fact that we're going to have probably around $12 million in actual receipts, revenue from property tax, and so a 10% increase, I think, is appropriate. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Harris. And I just want to add that having been at the county for as many years as I did, and the county's budget is primarily property tax. I can tell you our county assessor, Gus Martinez, is very aggressive when it comes to getting new developments on the tax rolls. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's already aware of all the apartment complexes that are under construction and already planning to add them to the tax rolls. So I also, like Councilor Harris, feel confident in what you're projecting. Anything else from the committee? Councilor Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification. Thank you, Ms. Keys, for the presentation. What's the breakdown again for property tax revenues that goes to the city, to the county, and I think there's a portion of the state, but also the school district? I know we've seen those numbers before, but I couldn't remember the percentages.
We can get you the specifics, Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, but right now, the city is about 2.3 mils of the 30-plus mils. So we're like at 9% of the total property tax burden by the citizens.
So the breakdown would be helpful, just because if we ever were to increase property taxes, very small percentage, I don't know, maybe the smallest
We are the smallest.
would come
Because
to
you
us.
have the city of Santa Fe, the county of Santa Fe,
Right.
Santa Fe schools, community college,
Right.
and state are all,
Is it broken down, though, the same way GRT percentages distribution?
it would tell you how many mills per entity.
So I guess percentage, I don't think in mills, because mills always confuses me. So maybe if you give us the percentage breakdown, that'd be great. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, Councilor Harris.
I've done the math previously, maybe a year or so ago, just looking at my residential property tax bill and then a bill on some commercial property that we own. It is about 9% on residential, it's about 12% on commercial. And so, but yeah, we get by far the smallest share, given the county, the school district, and the community college, and various charter schools, a lot of charter schools. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, departmental specific issues that we wanted follow-up on. The first I'd like to discuss is the DWI forfeiture program. We were provided a memo over the weekend in our May 1st package. We have a memo dated April 30th, 2019 from the city attorney regarding the DWI forfeiture program and when the city can stop the program, how many vehicles currently have been impounded, and how money in the reserve fund can be used. Councilor Lindell, this was one of the issues that you had concerns with.
Thank you, Chair. And a couple of things. First of all, the chief isn't wearing his bulletproof vest this morning, so I guess he's feeling pretty confident about things.
You're also not
Yeah, I'm not packing anything. We're all good up here. I do want to thank Ms. McSherry for a really detailed explanation. I know these kinds of things, when we bring them up and we ask you to get these to us so quickly, is really impressive, and I'm grateful. Remind me what page this is on.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Lindell, it's on page 45 of the May 4th packet.
Got it. A couple of things I want to ask about this. Chief, maybe if you could come forward. And I also want to thank the chief for giving up his Saturday and going down to the food depot. And how many pounds of potatoes did you guys rebag?
5,000 pounds.
5,000 pounds.
Pellets.
I thought that was really, really great to see you there. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
I think that we're all pretty aware, or that we have a general belief that this program is going to wind down, that the courts are going to close this program down. On a personal level, I do want to see us go ahead and move toward closing this program down. I've never been a great supporter in it. It's just a tough program. I know that, people have consequences for their behaviors, but I think sometimes this forfeiture program has been particularly hard on families. They've dealt with someone with addiction issues and had enough pain that then when their vehicle gets taken away and they can't get themselves to work, I think we're piling on a little, particularly when we haven't gone to court with them, and on and on and on. But that's just my opinion. A couple of things I'd like to know about trying to wind this program down. Ms. McSherry was really clear in this, that we need to bring an ordinance forward. In the meantime, could you put together, Chief, a couple of different scenarios of how we could wind this program down and get it closed out, whether we need to continue to do these auctions ourselves, or if we could go ahead and hire a third party to just come in and get these vehicles and get them out of there and let them auction them and we get some percent of it. If you could put together a couple of scenarios on that in the near future, that would be really helpful to us, I think. Another question that I had on this was, how can the money for this program, because how much do we have sitting, like $500,000?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rendell, that sounds about correct, about 500,000.
Cowboy math? Yeah, good enough. I'm wondering, I know that we still have a little question of, does some of it need to be returned, and what are the appropriate uses? And Ms. McSherry said that we should find uses having to do with DWI enforcement, prevention, and education. I'm wondering if perhaps you and Ms. McSherry and myself could sit down and have a conversation about if we could divert some of that money into some very, very specific treatment programs that we have ongoing, and some other ways that that money might be allocated. So is that something that you would be willing to do, Ms. McSherry? Yeah. So those are my comments on this. I think that exactly what we needed was in this memo to let us know that in order to formally close this down, we need to do it by ordinance. But in reality, at this moment in time, we have pulled the plug on this program. And I think that the next reasonable step would be for you, Chief Padilla, to bring to us, if you have other positions, you said you had 2 people employed in this, other places that they could be redeployed to, rehired, those kinds of things. But I think we might as well move as quickly as we can on this, because I don't think that this program really has any future. So those are my comments on it.
Great, thank you, Councilor Rendell. Councilor Romero Worth.
So thank you, Aaron, for this report. Really appreciate it, and thank you. And I bet they were. I was just going to get over there because I'm sure the chief had to get all these details so that you could put them in the memo. So thank you to both of you. I'm just curious, Aaron, how your crystal ball looks this morning. And you mentioned in here that the city has a petition for cert pending with the New Mexico Supreme Court, challenging the holding in Espinosa, which, of course, is the Court of Appeals case that, I guess, invalidated this program. Any sense of timing and, when that piece of it will be sort of completed so that we can make plans here at the city about how this program closes down, assuming that that's the course it stays on?
Right. Chair Beta, Councilor Romero Worth. The court did ask for a response from the opposing party. Has that deadline passed now, Mike? Okay, so that deadline's passed, so we haven't heard anything from the Supreme Court after that. So after our request for cert, they asked for a response. It could have been, advocating against certiorari. So that didn't happen. According to the new justices on the court, asking for a response doesn't necessarily suggest that they are or are not particularly interested in the issue, and most requests for certiorari are not accepted. So just based on statistics, it's likely it won't be accepted, but we don't know yet.
And what would be the time, Mr. Chair and Aaron, about the time frame for, feeling comfortable that we're outside the window of when the court would take any action? I mean, will they at some point, they will at some point say we're not granting cert. So any sense of, is that 6 months, couple of weeks, a year? What are we looking at? Any sense of that?
Councilor Beta and Councilor Marworth, I would guess it would be within the next couple months that we'll have either cert denied or accepted. If it's accepted, then we do full briefing to the court. And then we'll have no idea which way it will go at that point. But before it's been accepted, the likelihood of us getting a hearing on the issue is unlikely. Just because most requests are denied.
So if the court denies our application for cert, then we will know very definitively what we need to be doing here to shut this down.
Chairman Abate, Councilor Merworth, that's correct. Yep. Then Espinosa will be the final law on the issue from the Court of Appeals.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, will you keep us up to date on that? Because should we get to that point, I would like to bring it forward to the council for discussion on if we do, in fact, want to put resources into any more effort on this.
Chairman Abate, Councilor Lindell, that definitely makes sense. And actually, at that point, I would probably recommend that we strike the law from our books because it would be illegal at that point. We'd have to either substitute it or delete it.
Okay, just keep us up to date. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else on this issue? Councilor Vihil-Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to state that I very much agree with Councilor Lindell's comments, and I like the idea of seeing if there are any other uses for these funds that deal with, did you say treatment? Yes. Because that's something our community very much needs. Thank you. Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. We look forward to the follow-up. The next item, and what is actually the next page in our packet, page 47, is information on city councilor salaries. Councilor Romero Worth, you were wondering what the justification for that is. During the legislative session in 2018, there was an amendment that increased maximum pay for Class A county commissioners from $34,500 to $39,106. According to our rules, councilors shall receive compensation for their services to the city in the amount equal to the maximum amount authorized by the legislature to be paid for county commissioners in Class A counties. So the last increase to councilor salaries occurred in 2006 from $29,000 to $34,500, and based on the increase that the county was given, we will be getting an increase ourselves. Ms. McCoy, that would be effective July 1st. Is that when it's proposed?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. Councilor Romero Worth, any questions on this issue?
No, again, I appreciate the follow-up on this. I learned some things. I was not aware of this provision in the city ordinances. So thank you for I appreciate it.
Okay. Anything else from the committee on this issue? No? Okay, Councilor Vihil-Coppler, you had raised a concern regarding parking structures, parking revenue collected. Can we have our Public Works Director come up for a minute? I don't know if there's any specific information. I think, Councilor, you were concerned about maybe the parking. Well, go ahead and ask your questions regarding parking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern has to do with revenue that maybe we are not collecting, and maybe we should. And as I asked questions about this, I began to find that there are many things we do with regard to parking that we don't really, I believe, have any cohesive place which provides a framework for why we do this and even how we do this. And so I am of the opinion that the governing body should consider directing Public Works Parking Division to develop a policy of some sort. I call it a policy. I don't know what it would be called, but to develop something where we have a framework for how we do business with regard to parking. It's been a concern of mine for some time. I feel like when I go to different entities to ask questions, I don't really get a lot of responses that make me feel like it's a cohesive plan. And when you look at, how we treat parking for legislators, how we treat parking for downtown versus one section versus another, or, Guadalupe Street, when we decide how we treat parking for hotels that may ask, we've got some arrangements there, and the like. So I don't see any rhyme or reason for any of it. Some of it I question whether we should be doing it all. And so I would think that, as a fiscal agent for everything that we do, the monies that we collect or don't collect, my thought, we ought to be a little bit more contemplative about whether this is the right thing, these are the right things to be doing. So that's my thought. I think if we don't bring it up and see that there is some revenue that could be sliding out the door uncollected, which I consider that to be revenue, even though it's a kind of a silent item that you can't really put your finger on. I really do believe we need to give the Public Works Parking Division something to rely on. And then the other part of that is enforcement. There's another issue that has been brought up, and that's with regard to signage. There are members of the public who have contacted me and questioned if a parking lot follows the same rules as parking meters, i.e. shutting down at 6, and some of them have received parking tickets in some of our lots, not realizing that we don't shut down at 6, but some do. And then there's the question of, unmanned garages, because we are changing over, and I understand that the rail yard garage this last Saturday was not manned. So there's parking monies that are out the door on that. There's also been a question about the lease with the rail yard and why it's going to be forever and a day before we get monies from that parking. And so there's just a whole lot of unanswered questions, and I think that it's time we take a look at how all of this is organized. And the first step is realizing what's going on, what's not going on, and how do we plan for making it more cohesive. And I suggest that we take a real deep dive on this and come up with some kind of policy behind this. So I'll be, pursuing this further in some fashion. So I just wanted to bring it up, and I think it's definitely a case for revenue that's silently walking out the door. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything else from the committee regarding parking in general? Okay. On page 42 of our packet, we have on page 42, 43, and 44 a breakdown of training, tuition, and registration. Page 42 is the recommended budget for training, tuition, and registration broken down by department. And then page 43 and 44 are the different training topics that we have. Councilor Harris, did you want to just spend a few minutes on training and what your thoughts are regarding the cities?
Well, my thoughts is really how important this is. In the past budget hearings that I've participated in, we really didn't talk about training, tuition, what I call in professional development. So I think it's important, and it's certainly part and parcel of the whole package that we provide, that we offer to our staff, whatever they may be, whatever job they may hold. So I'm glad to see this level of information. I think it's something that we need to kind of refine a bit over time, make sure we understand what it's about, as well as then on occasion you're looking at particular programs. And I know that the city manager is very focused on really a comprehensive safety program through essentially the new, I don't know, I wouldn't really call it a new position necessarily. It's a position that we've had that I don't think has necessarily gotten a lot of attention. And I know that we've also moved, well, let's see, safety's in, I need to get this right, safety's in HR and risk is in finance now. And so we've split those functions, and I would think we'll get a much higher level of focus and just in programs. Quite frankly, this is not something we all know. This is not something you do one off, just once a year. These should be rigorous programs. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I don't have too much more to say on this, but I think it's important to, at some point, kind of look at what all this means, provide a higher level of detail. Maybe it'd be the appropriate time to do it when we really start to break out the safety program citywide. Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I salute Councilor Harris for focusing on this because I think it really goes to the next level of the budget. We've tried to do right by our employees with the salary increases and the full implementation of the classification and compensation study. And this speaks to what happens after they're employed and after they're being paid. I remember our brief orientation we had when I joined this body, and we spent a morning looking at the city budget, and I remember looking at the pie chart that said what percentage of the city budget is spent on salaries and benefits and what percent is spent on training and professional development. And for all the money we put into paying people, and more now because we're calling it a people first budget, if we don't give people a chance to develop and grow on the job, we're really undermining the workforce. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I think we need to continue it, and I think we need to add other opportunities to it so that we're really investing in our people's career development. And so I salute our HR department for focusing on this. I think it may well have been something that you did in your day, but it got lost in the shuffle, and it was ignored for quite a while. If you look at the numbers that we got when we came on the council, it was just a tiny sliver of the city budget, and now it's not what it needs to be. It needs more focus. But I really think this is an indication that our HR department gets it, and that the more you invest in people's opportunity for career growth and personal development, the greater the return on the investment is to the people in the city who are benefiting from their service. So it's really good to see that happening now, and it's something we do need to continue to focus on. I agree, Councilor, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Anything else on this topic from the committee or the councilors? Okay, I'd like to draw your attention now to the memo dated May 4th, 2019. On the bottom of that memo is a breakdown of Finance Committee and follow-up presentations that Ms. McCoy and I have scheduled. In May, we would like a presentation on benefits. We'd also like to discuss the health fund reserve levels. In June, we'd like a presentation on claims, and also we'd like to take up lodger's tax and allowable uses. In July, I'd like a presentation on the rail yard, and I want to start following up on those discussions with not only internally but also with the rail yard corporation. In August, a presentation on our after-school programs with both Parks and Recreation and Community Services. In September, if we could get an update on fleet. And then, of course, there's going to be the ordinance changes to the land use fees, and specifically to that, the governing body there on May 29th, there will be an introduction of the ordinance. The first hearing of the ordinance will be at Public Works on June 10th. Finance Committee will take it up on either June 17th or July 1st, and then the governing body will hear the land use fees for action on July 10th or July 31st. And then I'd like the ordinance change to the PNM franchise fees to be heard by Finance on June 3rd. I do plan on meeting with the Chair of Public Works and requesting that he schedule time to follow up and hear regarding the Parks and Recreation small park projects that may be in the pipeline. We need an update to the short-term rental ordinance. And then I would also ask him if we could hear, if he's okay with the schedule for hearing the PNM franchise fees. And so with that, is there any other topics that the committee or the counselors would like to cover today before we call for a motion approving the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020? Councilor Lindell.
On the presentations and talking about the short-term rental ordinance, I had a somewhat in-depth conversation with Land Use Director Carol Johnson last week, and I'm going to ask the sponsor and the co-sponsors, of which you are one, to have a consideration of holding back on the ADU ordinance change until we get the study back that we've commissioned on short-term rentals. I think that these two items get confused some in the minds of the public and our constituents, and that we might do well to put those on parallel tracks and move them forward together so that we don't move one forward and then a month and a half later work on the other one and say, we should have done that in the other one. So I'm going to ask for that consideration. I'm just giving a heads up on that. The other thing I did want to say before we move to a motion is, we've seen a lot of paper in the last few weeks and a lot of things on our screen, and I just want the people in the finance and all the other department chairs to know that sometimes late at night when I'm going through these, I feel a little exasperated, but it's exasperation with myself that I don't pick it up a little quicker sometimes, because it can be confusing, but the light that always turns on in my head is that someone put these together in a very meaningful, purposeful way, and it's an insane amount more work than me sitting there trying to read through it. And this is by far the very, very best budget presentation that I've ever sat through. And I'm appreciative of you guys, and please do not think that it goes unnoticed. It's really, really been a Herculean task, and you rose to it and you got it done, and it's been really understandable. I'm very appreciative.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell. Councilor Harris, did you have anything?
Not really specific. There on Friday I sent a few things out that, I spoke to one of them on the property taxes. One of them was answered on the schedule for the land use fees. But I also, maybe this is for Public Works on 3102, Fund 3102, because I'm asking about the balances, anticipated drawdowns, revenues in FY20. So that's really a Public Works issue. The enterprise funds, maybe if we just add that to our schedule here of some sort of review, but Chair, if you'd work with Ms. McCoy on that, I think it'd be good. I'd be satisfied with that. Then I think I'll just have a one-on-one discussion with Ms. McCoy about this whole benefits, contractual services, interfund transfers. I'm sure there's a straightforward answer on that. So I'm satisfied. I also want to reinforce what Councilor Lindell has just said. I remember my first rodeo, so to speak, budget rodeo 4 years ago. There was no training, quite frankly. I've said this, and Councilor Villarreal has said this as well. There was no training, and we were looking at big headlines, budget deficit. So we've come a long ways in those 4 years, and certainly this, building the FY20 or reviewing the FY20 budget has been really a very satisfying experience for me. It's far better than anything we've done before. I squawked a little bit about the amount of the amount of information when we get it, and so I'm sure the next rodeo for FY21 people will be able to get it a little bit sooner. But Ms. McCoy, you and your staff and everybody who's worked on this have been very responsive. I know you got out ahead of it early with the various departments and did in fact do a deep dive, and so I appreciate it very much. I think the city of Santa Fe is on pretty solid ground right now, financially, including getting our reserves back up to where we said we would, but that's, there's been issues around that, and so I think we're doing well, and I think we'll continue to do even better as you continue to refine our city processes and all the things we're doing, ERP. So congratulations to you and the people who work with you and work for you. And so those are my words. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Harris. Councilor Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. I never really heard back about the community room at the Chavez Center and what we could do to improve the acoustics so that we can use that room more. And then also, I would be at some point very interested in what we're doing in terms of water conservation in parks and rec. And I see the director is not here today, but maybe that's something that we can follow up in other places. And then also I'll just echo the other members, Councilor Lindell, Councilor Harris, in saying thank you to Mary and Eric and Brad and Mary, all of your team and all the directors that are here in this budget. I would agree this has been a good experience and great to see what our priorities are for the year going forward and that we have a foundation to build from. So thank you, everybody, for all your work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilor Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the follow-up. I know there's a lot more information, but all the packets of the follow-up questions we had. And I noticed that Community Services was here, and I was just curious if anyone had questions because they did come here early to join us. I didn't have questions, but it was very thorough, the explanation of next steps for the youth programs and how you will be working with Parks and Rec, Parks and Rec department. So I don't know if there was any questions. I guess not. I was just following up on some of the pieces that we got to follow up on, and Joe Beta had provided us with an update about what it would cost to tell or have a live stream of our other community or other committees. So I was wondering if there was a sentiment with the governing body to pursue that and move forward, or if that was just an informational item for us to know how much it would cost, or if we were going to fold that into possibly looking at that into this fiscal year. So I guess I was asking my colleagues what you were thinking about this, because I think Councilor Harris asked about that.
I think it was me, actually,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair. It was this end of the dais. we kind of blurred. Go ahead.
I would be inclined to have that come to a committee and have a little more complete breakdown of it before we took any action on it.
Okay. I guess I'm just curious because it is a piece of, well, it's a budget item that we would have to add, and it's not cheap. So just curious what anyone thought about that. I'm in favor if we have money for it. I think people want to know what's happening in the committee meetings. But he did make some suggestions about remote access software license, et cetera. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious how to move forward with that.
Yeah, I appreciated the information, I have to say. I'm not sure I'm prepared to make a motion right now, and I don't know that we'd know where the money's coming from.
Right.
But I just think it is an interesting conversation starter about whether this is something that would be valuable to the public. And I think it would be valuable for us, just in the sense of it would help generate public understanding about how the sausage gets made. So I'm interested in continuing the conversation. I'm also curious whether what was proposed in this memo, I think we're on radio too, and would radio pick that up, or is this just our and I don't have enough understanding about how everything works. So I think definitely more information is needed, and I appreciate the information about just kind of initial price tag.
Right.
So
I just wanted to flag it because I think it's a potential opportunity for us. And then based on the community room, just to follow up on that, we don't have Wi-Fi in there. At least we didn't for a while. So I was curious with the improvements of utilizing that space, how we can also have Wi-Fi, because it limits us when we have our own meetings for the city there, when there's no Wi-Fi to be able to do presentations, et cetera.
and on that point, wouldn't be a complete hearing without an on that point. I would just say, as we're looking to do more community outreach, that space, I think, it's a perfect space. So we should make sure that we have it available as we ramp up that side of things.
Do you have something on that? I'm taking over, Chair. Sorry.
Just general on community outreach. Get rid of those damn chairs out there. Those are the worst chairs in towns.
Yes.
I mean, I'm
They're
serious.
very
I think
uncomfortable.
they're so uncomfortable. If we want to make contact with people, we should get rid of those chairs.
I agree. So just to follow up on we had a very extensive conversation about lifeguard recruitment and just in general supporting Parks and Rec with all of the services they provide and the programs that we have, how to make sure that we have enough staff for that. It was brought to my attention that there's a possibility of eliminating a supervisor position, and I'm wondering, after all that conversation we had about the need for staff support, that there was a potential cut now for a supervisor position. So I don't think we have anyone to be able to answer this. So I'm just curious if you all have staff or other staff could be able to answer that, because it took me by surprise seeing that we've kept talking about short-staffed, and then the supervisor position was eliminated.
Mr. Manager, can you get back to us on that?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, I can absolutely get back to you on that.
Thank you. And I have other questions, but I think I'll just email them to the appropriate staff. They're just more like outlying questions, not so much about budget and number, but processes and the way we do business in the city, just procedures. So I will wait and just email those to the appropriate people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Vigil-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some follow-up questions on the May 5th memo we got. And it kind of coincides with what Councilor Villarreal just said in terms of staffing and the amount of workload. But I noticed in the FTEs in the Public Works Department, they went down in their total from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. And there's significant, in my opinion, for such a big department that has a lot to do, there seems to be some significant decrease in positions, and I'm not sure that I understand that from our budget hearings. I don't know what that is.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, a number of those positions that were reduced are actually reduction because of what we're doing with parking, with automating the parking systems. And a number we're cleaning up basically history of double fills across the city, as Director McCoy said, pretty much throughout the presentation, and trying to clean up the POL across the city. We're not intending to reduce services other than, of course, parking and the automating of the parking lots. We understand they have a huge role, and they'll continue to have a huge role in the city, so none of that should represent a decrease in services.
That's 9 positions. Are they all coming out of parking? Does anyone know? Those are in the classified status?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vihil-Coppler, we can get your breakdown specifically for that department, for the 9.
Ms. Wheeler's here. Maybe she can address the question.
I think we have that information we can provide.
I think the concern may be with 311 positions, which 9 specifically, as the manager said, there were some that were double filled, there were some that from parking, there were some from, so you need to get back to us.
I just think that's significant, and I definitely want to know, because that's an important department with all kinds of things happening around the city. So there you go. During these budget hearings, I see, and I certainly understand, and I'm very thankful that we discussed a lot of very, very important issues, a lot of great programs, and it indicates that our staff is going to be very busy. And, it makes me proud to be here and to recognize staff for all that's going to happen in the future and has been happening. So as you can probably tell by now, that's one of my greatest concerns being on the council. I'll say it again, human resources is generally 80 to 90% of the budget, and that's a figure I definitely want confirmation on down the road, Ms. McCoy. So I'm very interested in how much of our total budget is driven by human resources. I didn't hear anything in the budget discussions, and I know this isn't necessarily maybe the place to do it, but I do want to make sure that we have something somewhere which provides direction on keeping the comp plan up to date, and so that we don't get so far behind like we did, and certainly that it's based on up-to-date job classifications and the like. That's the easiest way to spend money because it's not such a whopping amount at once. I did notice in the information we got with the salary schedule, there's a few positions in there we no longer have job titles, such as deputy city manager. That's still in there. So, there's some tweaking that needs to happen. I also would like us to keep an eye on position control. I know that Ms. Salazar is working diligently to identify positions, and I think a lot of that has been done now. I think this going forward, we need to keep track of what we have, double fills, underfills, classified temp. Oh, that's the other thing. I don't really think we ever discussed how many temporary employees we have. And because those take up budget, and we need them. We certainly need them. The summer program, we used a lot of temporaries for those. We used temporaries. We talked a little bit about lifeguards in the summer. So we do make great use of them, and certainly in our summer parks and rec, weed cleanup, median cleanup, and all of that. So that's a really important part of our budget, and I'm assuming that we are funding temporaries by using salary savings. I really don't know. But at one time, the city had to let go of 60 temporary positions. You may recall that. And at the time, we didn't really know, or the city didn't know how many we really had and all that. But a lot of employees in those positions got laid off like overnight. So we really need to avoid that in the future. It's really kind of an unsung positions that we need to keep track of. And I hope that at mid-year budget, we'll have a little bit more information on what positions we have, where we're at. It's really important. I am also interested in transparency. We all are concerned with transparency, and we have these hearings televised and such, and that's really important for the public to know what we're doing. But it's also important to be transparent internally. There are many people I sought out to ask questions of, and frankly, they didn't know. They didn't know some things. Now, I don't know what that's attributed to, but I think it's important to have a, consensus as much as you can reach it in budget development internally as well. I certainly want to echo what my fellow counselors have said. This staff has been tremendous, and the questions were hard. The work was hard. I can't imagine that. I'm sure you all didn't have a weekend. You haven't had many weekends for a long time, and it's very much appreciated. This is for all that's still needed. There's so much professionalism that you all have exhibited. You've had hard questions. You've stood up and you've just performed remarkably, and it's such an important thing to this city. I know you understand that, but I want you to know that we understand it. And I appreciate everything that you all have done. Thank you.
Councilor Lindell, did you have a follow-up or a motion you wanted to make?
I have both.
Okay.
One very, very small item just to put on the list into the future. We need to have a discussion about the fees from wastewater to the MRC. I think that was around a $400,000 or $600,000 issue. So let's just put that on a list, and maybe we can talk about that at Finance sometime, Chair.
Yes.
And the mayor, to my left, wants to have a word before I make a motion, but I am ready to make a motion.
Okay, Mayor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the work of the committee. Very thorough, very thoughtful, constructive engagement, which I think does the city proud. And I wish in the spirit of transparency and in the spirit of citizen and resident engagement, I really do wish we had the same kind of attendance at this that we sometimes get at council hearings. This is where the budget gets made. This is where the future gets established in terms of programming and priorities. So it is the important work of getting ready for the year ahead. It's also, I think, important to recognize that city government, particularly under a new administration with a new charter, is moving forward one step at a time. This budget is really the first one that I had the opportunity to participate fully in working with our team in creating, and it represents our collective priorities. It says we're going to put people first. We're going to take care of the long overlooked and too long deferred investments that really need to be done. And they start with investing in people and investing in growing the city's capacity to do business effectively, competently, and consistently. I think the ability to put money into class and comp after successive studies that led to no action is a demonstration that when we say we're going to do something, we do it. I think the agreement that we reached with our friends from AFSCME at the council hearing 2 weeks ago is another demonstration that we're really rebuilding the fibers of the city's ability to keep its word to the people who work for the city, and by doing that, keep our promises to the people who live in the city. Our commitment to increase police pay falls in the same category of promises made and promises kept. That public safety and security is the highest priority of this governing body and of this administration, and the way you demonstrate that is by increasing the compensation for the people who are responsible for delivering that service. Sprinkled throughout the budget are other specific targeted investments, and we really didn't dwell on those very much. Perhaps when we get this back in front of the whole council as a meeting, and we can look at targeted investments designed to make incremental improvements. It goes on top of things like the $20 million GRT-backed bond, the first green bond issued in the state's history. These are all steps in the right direction, but you don't overcome years of deferred maintenance in one budget. This is, as Director McCoy said, a snapshot in time. It is an incremental improvement over a long-term series of investments that we have to stay the course with. We can't suddenly decide next year that we have to reverse directions. We have to stay with these commitments and continue to make them steadfastly and consistently. So having said that, I think there's some things that we should flag as coming attractions. If you drive on I-25 occasionally, you'll see a billboard that says, "Watch this space," and I think that's what we're saying here with this budget, that there are more things to be done. I think the very aggressive and constructive agenda that you've laid out for presentations speaks to continuing this process of imagining and investigating possibilities going forward. And some of them are programmatic. Frankly, some of them in the future, as we look at the city government, will be structural. We have a very interesting vestigial remain of a city government in some respect. If you think of the committee structure we take for granted, we have a finance committee which does tremendous work. We have a public utilities and a public works committee. But increasingly, if you track the conversations of this body over the course of the finance hearings, people kept asking questions about our delivery of services to people, human services, community services. We have no committee that looks at community services to kids, to seniors. We really don't have a place as a committee structure to look at something like a commitment to our young people that anyone who wants a mentor in this city should get one. There's no place to take that plan other than public works, public utilities, or finance. And I think structurally that's a flaw in our system. I think another flaw in our system has to do with the questions we've raised about the rail yard. And there'll be more questions raised, but we have a land use department that does planning. We don't have a redevelopment authority or a development arm that looks at implementing housing and other development opportunities for the city to own its own development activities. We've outsourced those to independent bodies that really don't report back to the city. I think this is the first time in some time that the finances of the Rail Yard Commission were brought in front of this body. We should be not only looking at that, but as our finance department will be doing, our other major assets that the city owns in its portfolio. So there's more work to be done, but this is as my colleagues have said, this is a tremendous achievement. This is a major step forward in professionalizing and regularizing and making transparent the work of building a budget for the future of the city. The line items that you went over as a committee, one line item at a time, laid out in granular detail, I think is an incredible level of specificity, opening up the books so that anyone who wants to see item by item where the city puts its money has the opportunity to review that, ask questions, and get remarkable responses in almost real time. So, and if you forget, the work that we do, that you all have done in the budget hearings, is really the tip of the iceberg. What you haven't seen, because the staff does it behind the scenes, are months and months of preparation. This budget started to be prepared at the same time that our finance department and that team was putting together our audit response. they've been working not just in producing the budget, but in really keeping the city's finances and its fiscal books in order for a 6-month period of time at an unprecedented rate, and working with department heads in a way that really created a coherent, team-based approach to building a budget. So everyone who tipped their hats to your work and to the work of our department heads and to the city manager absolutely were spot on. This is a remarkable achievement, and I do hope you'll take some time to now breathe, relax a little bit. Brad, I'm glad to see you could get a haircut squeezed in during this whole process. Congratulations. Good work to everybody. Really a phenomenal achievement in professionalizing and regularizing and making available to anyone who wants to see it the real hard work of the city's budget, our finances, and our priorities. This budget started with values of investing in people, investing in neighborhoods, investing in sustainability, investing in a city government that works for people and to be more user-friendly, and everything you've produced really delivers on those promises. So I want to thank you personally as well. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for presenting and guiding us to a budget that I am really very, very proud to make a motion that we accept. That was my motion. Thank you.
So we have a motion to approve the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good job, Chair.